Military truck securely cordoned, taking in the sights and smell of evil, I look at each of the faces of the girls in our group. There is much animosity around, people killing in the name of religion and ethnicity. But 4 of us Hindu girls are fleeing under the cover provided by 18 of our Muslim classmates. They do not see us as different, even ready to jeopardize their personal safety on our account. That we Hindus are a minority has made no difference in the respect of our religious practices at the hostel by the majority who are Muslim. Beef is not allowed in the kitchen, just as pork is barred. Religion and ethnicity are often publicized or politicized, so the ruler of government feels safe if the common man is divided and killing each other. What better way to divide people than to accelerate already existing regional groups into communal disharmony? These riots were spearheaded by non-Bengali Muslims, while the Bengalis are fighting them to defend their Hindu brothers and sisters.
Around 6 o'clock this evening, a mob carrying burning torches had come charging to our college's main gate. We could see the blazing fires from our rooms, over the sea of heads amid the thick black smoke emitted by the torches. The crowd charged towards the heavy iron gate through whose grill the young hostel assistant saw the mob approaching. Luckily, a military sergeant by the name of Nobi Chaudhary, who was posted in the neighborhood, had been doing his rounds nearby, briskly walked up towards the gate. "Sir, sir, the crowd is approaching," the boy called out to him loudly, waving his hand frantically with torches in hand. Nobi rushed in front of the gate, pistol raised in a gesture to fire randomly at the crowds if they came any closer. His face blazed in anger, reflected by the light from the torches. The crowd immediately stopped short in their tracks, seeing the pistol aimed at them, but more from the expression Nobi wore on his face, implying he would not hesitate to shoot randomly, even at short range. After the crowd was compelled to retreat, Nobi Chaudhary had rushed to the hostel gate at the first floor. "Ladies, please open the door," he hollered through the wooden door. "Don't worry, you are safe. I'm an army officer." No one dared open the door without making sure who was outside. One of the girls, Shamsun Nahar, climbed 2 chairs placed one atop the other, with 2 girls holding her for balance, to peep through the ventilator. Seeing the uniformed athletic torso and the short crop of hair, she was relieved. When the door was opened, I had been kneeling on the floor, praying desperately for God to save us after having spotted the approaching mob from the window. I did not want to die at the hands of a frenzied mob. It would be such a wasted death. I needed to prove my mettle yet to my father, the world, and to Ronjit uncle, who had disowned me after I joined this course on completion of my graduation without consulting him. When finally the hostel gate was opened, the girls in fear and frenzy rushed upon Nobi Chaudhary, grabbing him by his hands and shoulders, shaking him hard. It was a spontaneous burst of emotions, as much from the relief and gratitude as a query as to where he was during all those minutes that we lived in acute fear. But over and above, it was a desperate plea to him to take instant action to save us. Flabbergasted by the passionate outbursts of so many women, he immediately called for an army truck to evacuate us girls from the hostel. There was every possibility of the mob coming back, so there was no time to waste, no time for us to pack and take our belongings. We had trooped out of the hostel as we were, in uniform. The truck was now taking us to the Dhaka University Women's Hall, called the Chameli Hall. We would be safe there.
Ronjit uncle, who has an abiding influence on the girl protagonist, Maya, we come to share a dark secret in his life.
After lunch, as we stroll along the corridor towards the hotel's lobby, Shumitra realizes she does not want to part with him yet. There seems a bizarre connection between them. She does not want to break this spell, but realizes how unreasonable the idea is. After all, he is going back home to Vishnuganj the next morning. He checked into his hotel in spite of a house in Calcutta for a meeting with a foreign client who is staying here this evening. They are at the end of the corridor near the elevator when abruptly Ronjit uncle turns to face her.
Sumitra, don't go yet, he says firmly, looking earnestly into her eyes. Come upstairs, I would like to show you what I do. It's all in a folder for a presentation I'll be making to my client this evening.
Surprised at the request, but compelled by her own urge to stay, she finds herself silently nodding in agreement, following him into the lift. In his suite, sitting on the sofa in the living area, she flips through the pages of the folder retailing his businesses and charitable organizations. Ronjit uncle is seated close to her, leaning back comfortably on the sofa. Sumitra is acutely conscious of him watching her. She turns to glance at him sideways. When unable to resist, he slowly runs his fingers through her long flowing hair. Then, encouraged by her silence, her not stopping him, one of us, we are mere rear seat riders. Sumitra tries to relax, but the tension within her only grows. By now fiercely drawn to him both mentally and physically, she nestles closer to him and involuntarily places her head on his shoulder.
Ronjit uncle encircles the back of her shoulders with his right arm, continuing to cradle her head on his right shoulder. After a few brief moments when she lifts her head, she finds him watching her curiously. As their gazes meet, seeing the flaming desire in his light brown eyes, unable to control her own yearning, she tilts towards him and their lips touch in a flash. Then, without much ado, they are locked in a passionate kiss. Their kiss is electrifying, sending shock waves through their body and mind as they continue to kiss breathlessly. Taken aback by their reckless passion, but with no power to restrain themselves, they get up slowly arm in arm, they walk towards the bedroom. Sumitra has been lonely for a very long time. As attracted as she feels to this man, she cannot hold herself any longer. The age difference between them, his grey hair and the deep lines on his face are overshadowed by his lean, toned and athletic form. But in reality it is his mind that has ignited hers. The physical longing is a manifestation of that mental attraction she feels. The book carries on. It ends, it has a kind of finality. It has a sense of completion in the sense that it deals with woman's emancipation, how a daughter actually performs the last rituals of her father, not the son, and how a mother gives her daughter out on marriage instead of the father. So all that happens towards the end of the film, end of the book, and I can see things. So that's how the thought came.
Could become a film one day.
It could very well be, and I think in a way it ends warmly and nicely, because I think it's imperative with whatever is happening around us that women today need to be empowered more than anybody else, at least in India, if not anywhere else. And the only way to sort of stand up to whatever is happening is economic power, independence. All that takes place in the final chapters of the book, which I think is a happy ending. Thank you for writing it. Would you like to say a few words about the book that you have written for? I believe she took all of 4 years to write this book. 2 years, okay, too short. 2 years. That's a long time. Would you like to say a few words?
Yes, I would like to sincerely thank each and everyone present today for making the effort to be here to help me launch my most cherished dream. This was a dream that I nurtured and pursued with a single-minded purpose, quitting a career of almost 2 decades. It therefore gives me great pride and satisfaction to present to you my debut novel, Across Borders. Today I share with you not merely the joy of being a published writer, but also an endeavor to reach out to the world at large with my views, And what better mode to start with than through the telling of a tale of my roots. I quote V.S. Naipaul here from his book, India, A Million Mutinies Now, which aptly describes my attempts to define Maya, my protagonist. She was still part of the story she had told me over 2 or 3 meetings. She was full of the emotions of it and unable to see in it the historical progression that I thought I saw. I would now like to share a small excerpt from the book in the words of Maya, the narrator. That day in 1948, Kalpana and I left to cross over to another life with Ronjit uncle across the Pakistan border. There was no Bangladesh yet and was not going to be for a long time. Mihirpur is a small town near the city of Dhaka in erstwhile East Pakistan, currently Bangladesh. I was about to transcend the border of my childhood. After the age of 8, I was sucked into adulthood like quicksand. It would only be 15 years hence that I would again cross the border back into India. After my graduation in 1964, I would return to work, marry, raise a family, and live the rest of my life on the Indian side. A few years later, in 1971, the home that I grew up in was to become a part of Bangladesh, no longer of East Pakistan as when I would leave it. As the country was recontoured into Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India, ensuing much turmoil, so did my life across its border in developing 3 distinct identities: childhood, adolescence, and adulthood, yet chiseled by the rough hands of time and experiences. Even today, there are perhaps 1 million Mayas in Calcutta alone. By the time I grew up, the troubles were a thing of the past. But you really never get away from the memories of the upheaval and uprooting if you happen to be living in Kolkata, where needless to say, this novel was conceived. This book is a labor of 2 years. It has been a gratifying journey, but what will be more so is if the reader finds a bit of herself or himself in the book. While in the course of life I found myself uprooted to unknown lands, it is here at home in Calcutta, where I was born and raised, that across borders was conceived and nurtured. So it is only fitting that I hand over my baby to you, my firstborn literally. I hope that you will assist in its first baby steps before it sets out to find its place under the sun.
Sincerely hope that your words come true, that it will be made into a film someday. I'd like to take a few minutes of your time just to say a few words on behalf of Mr. Saikia. This is what he'd like to say to all of you. Firstly, a big thank you for being here today. A big thank you on the behalf of Kaziranga Books. And he'd like to tell all of you that it's been a real pleasure to be a part of this journey with Shubhashri. Across Borders is a story that most of his generation has identified with, and it's indeed very close to his heart. In particular, Maina Bhagat and Ketki for making this evening as enjoyable as it has been. And once again, thank you to all of you for being such a wonderful audience. I would like to now inform everyone that Shubhashri's books are here, stacked up for all of us to take home. So please